are here on time. We have a lot of you coming in as I'm talking here, so we'll get everybody caught up. But today's webinar is what your employees want but won't tell you. So we're going to talk about this in a couple of parts. We're going to talk about what your employees want. We're going to make sure we understand that. Then we're going to talk about the things that maybe they won't tell you, things they won't talk to you about. I'm going to make sure I pause there about 2/3 of the way through, answer any questions that you may have, and then I'm going to try to give you some of the really good actionable, now what you should do about it, right? What are the things that we want to do? So hopefully as we go through, that makes sense. I'm going to make sure I have my, there's a chat feature. So if anyone has any problems or questions, plop it into chat. I believe there's also a Q&A area which I will monitor. So if you want to ask a question, you can do it either in the chat, if that makes sense, or in the Q&A. I think the Q&A is a little bit easier. But certainly if you have a question as we're going along, that is the place to do it. All right, so now let's go ahead and get started. And I really want you all to take a moment to think about an imaginary situation, to think about what if. And what I mean by this is, imagine tomorrow you are going to start a job, a brand new job. It's exciting, right? There's so many possibilities, but you're going to start a brand new job. And what you don't know, what you don't get to control is who you are. So imagine starting a job tomorrow. You don't know if you're going to be, you don't know what your gender is going to be. You don't know what your race is going to be. You don't know what your sexual identity is going to be. You don't know if you're going to be the boss, if you're going to be the person cleaning the toilets. You don't know if you're going to be in customer service or in sales, if you're going to work in the office or be remote. You have no control. You have no idea what you're going to be when you magically, become this person tomorrow when you show up. It's probably not something you've ever thought about in that context, right? Because we think about things as us. Whatever makes us, whether we're male or if we're white or if we're black or if we're gay or we're straight, we think about things in the lens of us. But think about if you couldn't control that, right? If it's this imaginary idea, but if when you show up tomorrow, maybe someone's going to roll the dice and then you suddenly become these things. Now, why am I asking you to do this? It's obviously a little ridiculous. Why am I asking you even to think about this in this context? Well, it's pretty simple. Do you think that what you would want from that employer, do you think that what you would want from your job, from that company, from that culture, from that your boss, do you think that you might think about what you want and what you need and what's important a little bit differently if you didn't know what you were going to be? And this is often the challenge. This is often the thing that as leaders, we must think about the organization at a broader sense. We can't think about, well, what do I need as I'm a white male. What do I want as a white male going into that company? If I think about it, what do I want going into that company if I might be anything? Any possible person, any possible, different category or different outcome. Will I want that company to be something different than I would have if I thought about it only through my lens? So if we think about this for a moment, think about what that scenario might be. We might want something a little bit different from that company if we can't control that part of it. Now, clearly we can. Clearly, who we are at some level is not going to change. A lot of the things that I mentioned are not going to change. I'm not going to stop being certain things, as far as I know. But if we are conceptualizing our organizations to make sure it can meet the needs of any type of person, we're going to walk into this with a little bit of a different idea. So I'm Chris Dyer. Thank you for being on this webinar today. Really excited to think about this because I've been working with so many brands just this year around remote work, around leadership, and about creating an environment for companies and for employees that makes sense going into this 21st century. What we were doing even last year is no longer working, right? We have the remote work has now been thrust upon us, and I'm really happy about it. But this idea that we can actually be remote, where people didn't think it was even possible, has been thrown out. This idea that maybe we need to be more diverse in our thinking, that we need to be allies to those people that need it, that we need to create a better organization for our people in a much more impactful way is radically different than it was even in 2019. So we're going to walk through some of this today and really hopefully come up with some eye-opening ideas and things about what employees today are really thinking about, what they want, and what are the things they won't tell you about, and then what can you do about it. Now, we're going to base these around my 7 pillars of company culture. So I wrote this book, The Power of Company Culture, and in it there are 7 pillars. And I focus on these areas as the places where organizations can work to get better. And you might look at those 7 pillars and say, gee, Chris, we're really good at acknowledgement. But you might also say, but we're not so good at transparency. And so this helps you in the framework to know where to focus. Where do you go? Okay, which pillar should you be spending time to get better at? If you're already really good at acknowledgement and recognition, cool. Leave that to the side. Go focus on transparency. But this is the filter through which we are going to be viewing things today. Now, I've had such an amazing opportunity to share this message on the BBC, to the NBC News, and to talk about these things. It's so important. And there's such an appetite to understand what we can do better for our people and for our cultures, for our organizations. And my organization has been the breeding ground or the testing ground or the guinea pigs into figuring out what works. And I have been working with my people to change things, to alter things, to come up with better ideas. And I take these ideas and we try them here first. And People G2 is the sponsor of today's webinar, so thank you. But they are the guinea pigs for all the things that we try, and we figure out what works, and then we share it, and we talk about it with other organizations, with our clients, with HR professionals and CEOs and anyone who wants to take the lessons that we've learned. From these lessons, prior to us doing this, back in 2008, and we started the company in 2001, for the first 7 years, we were never a best place to work. No one ever heard of us. No one cared. And then we started doing these things, and things started happening, right? We became the best place to work over and over and over again. We were an Inc. 5000, fastest growing company, now 5 times, a 5th time, and we're really, really happy about that. And we've been seen all over. So if you are feeling like your organization is flat, maybe it's not as exciting, maybe it's not the place that people want to come and work, the top talent wants to work, you can do something about this. Okay, I'm not a giant Fortune 500 company, and we were able to do things to radically change this about us. So let's get into it. What do your employees want? Okay, we're going to start with what they want. We'll get to what they won't tell you in a minute. But what they want is transparency. Okay, this is a big, big, big one. They want to know what you know. They want to know what the goals are. They want to know what the P&L says. They want to know what's expected of them, what their goals are, what their key performance indicators would be, what the key performance indicators are for the company. They want to know so that they have a better opportunity to provide you with quality suggestions, better ideas, and understanding and knowing what they can do to move up, to make more money, to impact the organization, to maybe even keep things just status quo if that's what where they want to be in their career right now. But so many issues happen. When I go in and consult with companies, one of the biggest areas that we tackle first is this transparency pillar. And I can't tell you how many times organizations I've looked at the goals for the head of sales and the head of customer service and the head of operations, only to find out that their goals are not aligned. They are conflicting. Essentially, if the salesperson meets all their goals, the operations person could never meet their goals, right? So we find that if we can start sharing and talking about all of this, then everyone knows what everyone else knows to a certain point. There are obviously certain trade secrets or important things about employees' privacy we don't share. But I mean beyond that, right? If everyone understands what everyone else's goals are, we can be more aligned. And as we look to make changes in the organization, people need to understand what we're trying to change, why it's important, and what will the outcome be, how will it affect them. And I call this the understanding equals action. Okay? So what does that mean? Well, I'm going to have this little fancy graph here I made. Okay? So we have over here on the bottom left, oppose. So if I ask you to do something that you don't know anything about, that makes absolutely no sense to you, you will probably oppose it. Okay? If I say to you, go and walk down that really dark alley and open that door and go inside that building, and it's 3 o'clock at night, you might be like, whoa, Chris, why? Like, well, I'm not going to tell you why. I just need you to go walk down that dark alley, and walk into that door with no lights on and go inside. You should oppose me. You should say no. But if I give you more information, right? If I tell you, well, as you walk down the street, the lights will turn on inside the door. Another employee is waiting for you to give you your bonus check. I mean, this is ridiculous, but if I gave you the information, you might go, oh, of course I'll walk down that street and I'll walk in that door, right? We need to give people more information. And yet at work, we consistently see that leaders go into a room, they have a meeting, they open the door and say, guess what, everyone, now we're doing this. And they shut the door and expect everyone to go along with it. And that's not how real change happens. That's not how lasting change happens. So what we need to do is spend more time as leaders working on understanding. We need to work to get more understanding into the organization. As we do that, we will notice some passive support. We will begin to see more. Now, this also assumes, that your idea is good. If you feel like you have a good idea and you're out there explaining it and everyone understands it and they still won't support it, that should ring a bell. The light bulb should go on that maybe it's a bad idea. Okay? If you cannot get more than passive support and you have explained it and everyone understands it and very, very deeply and they still won't do it, it's a bad idea. So assuming it's a good idea and we give people more information, we should be able to move them from passive support to measurable support. And we should begin to see buy-in. We should start to get people who really can go along with it and understand the idea and understand why we're trying to make a change, understand why we need them to do something different than they were doing before. But where you get your real change, and this is what people need. They need deeper insight on a good idea. What we need is to find more people who are champions of change. And that means that they have deep, deep insight. They believe they have ownership around this, and they really understand why we want them to do it. And it's those people that we want out in the organization talking and training and really helping everyone else understand better. And so what employees want is the opportunity for deep insight. They want the opportunity to be moved to this place of buy-in or to potentially even a champion of change, as opposed to opening the door and saying, go do this thing now because we said so. This is the new thing. This is the flavor of the day. Go do this now, right? They want buy-in. They want to talk. They want to be helped along in this journey to get to that point. Now, the next area that what employees want is to radically change the performance management process. I'm going to walk you through a couple slides from Gallup. And it looks like there's a couple questions from people asking, will there be available to the slides? Yes. After this presentation, we will be sending out the slides. I will send out the video to this presentation, and you're more than welcome to share it amongst your organizations or your friends and your family, whoever might be interested. But upgraded performance management is key. And so Gallup recently put out some fantastic ideas around this that we could talk about here today. Traditional performance management is we get together once a year, and we talk about what you did and what you're going to do. And this really sets us up for kind of a negative interaction, right? Almost always the two people in that meeting have totally different perspectives. The leader is thinking one thing, the employee is thinking another, and rarely do you walk out of that meeting where both people are totally excited and happy. What we really want to do is re-engineer this. And so employees want a more collaborative process. They want more ongoing conversations. They want to know if things aren't going right away and not waiting for it to be a year from now, right? And that we should at least be doing a quarterly review. Now, I'm a big advocate for a monthly review, that you should be talking to your people as if it's a performance review every month. Now, it's shorter, it's faster, it's more agile than if you did it on a yearly basis, and you don't have to do as much prep. But if you're going to talk to your people once a month about where they're at, where you think they're at, hey, I expected you to be here, but you're really there. Or I expect you to be there, but you're killing it. Thank you. And here's where we can get better. In the last month, I noticed this about the meetings. I noticed this about your performance. Makes so much more of an impact to your people and allows you to be a better leader if you can get in that habit of doing it on a more ongoing basis. So if we upgrade this and we look at a frequency feedback, now this was a study that was around remote workers, which most people right now are working in a remote setting that were traditionally working in an office. So I thought this graph would be really important to understand that we really are seeing a higher frequency of feedback by managers in organizations that are being successful and are seeing higher growth, higher profits, higher performance, that they are able to give people feedback 80 to 100% of the time in a typical week, right? Able to have a conversation to say, here's where we're at, here's what I think, here's where I see you going, here's what you need to change. And a two-way street, right? That their employees saying back to the leader, great, thank you. What I really need from you is, can you help me? Can you get me back what I need a little bit faster? I mean, it's that two-way street feedback loop between those two people. Can't tell you how many organizations that have called me and said, we need your help, Chris, and then come to find out that they're meeting once a year or less and having these types of conversations. They might be doing it somewhat informally, but not in a more formal, let's sit down, this is why we are talking process. So think about increasing that frequency, and you will see rapid change in results. If we look at how we put our reviews on steroids, we want to think about our managers turning into being good coaches. So good managers are coaches. And they're looking at this as how do I help you as that person be a better employee? We want to focus on feed forward, not feedback. So what is feed forward? Feed forward is, hey, the next time you do this, can you do that? Right? So let's just say in a meeting, you talk a lot, manager comes to you, they could say, hey, you're always talking too much in the meetings. You need to stop that. You need to, back it up. That's feedback. And that's negative. It's going to be taken negative. But if your manager comes to you and says, hey, in meetings going forward, can you make sure that everyone has an opportunity to talk? Can you make sure that you're listening twice as much as you talk? Right? That's feed forward. That's going to be taken far more positively than feedback. We want to make sure we're meeting with them all the time, or monthly, whether it's weekly, whether it's quarterly, but not waiting to once a year. Okay, so really try to at least set that goal of a monthly review meeting. Focus on teamwork and collaboration, right? So that's what your meeting should be about. If teamwork and collaboration are important to your organization, that should be what your meetings are about. How did that employee work as a team? How do they collaborate? How can they do more of that? So focus on what's good about your organization, what your organization values, and that should be the lens by which your reviews are calibrated, right? We show up and we tell them all the things we don't like that they're doing. Instead, we should show up and tell them, I really like how you're helping us in our teamwork. I really like your collaboration over here. How do we do more of that, right? What we focus on grows. And then focus on behaviors that we want to reward, okay? Things like helping others and putting the clients first and exceeding goals and KPIs. We spend our time talking about the things they're doing well and the things that we value as an organization or as a team or as a leader, and less sort of waiting for anything else falls behind that. You will find that has a significant change in how everyone is viewing these types of meetings. Don't forget to have long-term career conversations. Do not ignore that. Maybe that's not a monthly thing, but certainly should be something you're talking about on a regular basis with your employees. We don't want to pretend that they're going to be here forever or that they may never think about doing something else. If we know that they're going to school and then eventually they're going to have a degree and they're going to go do something else, we should be talking about that. We should know that maybe they're planning on leaving in 2 years, and so you want to keep that in mind to know when it's time to bring in that next person to replace them. Make sure it's a two-way street. Make sure those conversations are not just what they need to do, but what that you can do as well to help them. And then think about those things that we talked about with that Gallup brought up, and these are some really the key areas in that article that maybe I didn't reach in those graphs. But when managers provide that constant feedback, team members are 5.5 times more likely to strongly agree that they received feedback. So 5.5 times more likely to say they're getting meaningful feedback, which people want. That's what employees want, is meaningful feedback. 3.5 times more likely to strongly agree that they are motivated to do outstanding work. So if you're telling people what they need to do, you're letting them know how they're doing, they're 3.5 times more likely to do more outstanding work. And then they're 2.7 times more likely to be engaged at work. So if you want more engagement at work, meet with people and give them more feedback about it. It's pretty simple. You don't even have to be particularly good at that. If you just at least are meeting with them and are trying, you're going to see an uptick. And if you can get better at that, you'll definitely see a major change with your teams and your organizations. Nobody wants to wait a year to know how they're doing. Remember that. Nobody wants to wait that long. Your employees want better. They want to know more often. And more specifically, as we look at the younger generations coming into the workforce, they are increasingly unhappy and are unwilling to wait for a yearly or bi-yearly review. They want it constantly. So then how do we do this? How do we make these changes in the organization? So one of the things that employees really want is they do not want to see huge, giant changes that are brought in and are disruptive, right? Where all of a sudden we're going to go from this one thing to this giant change. And so really what employees want is, if we're going to have change, that we do it in incremental bits that make sense. That we break it down into smaller pieces, and we use this idea of the aggregation of marginal gains, which says, how do we get 1% better without getting 1% worse? If you set a goal for an employee to get 1% better every month at this specific thing, that makes more sense. That's palatable. I can do that. You ask an employee to get 25% better this month at something, that's really difficult. And maybe they could, but their other work is going to suffer and they're going to get worse somewhere else. So think about this 1% idea. Now, maybe it's 1% a week, maybe it's 1% a month, maybe it's 1% a year. That's up to you as the leader to figure out what makes sense. But really focus on change as small and incremental. Break it down into its smallest pieces. And then go back to the employee, work with that employee to say, okay, we need to change this. And I've broken this down into 50 little things that we can do. Or you come up with the employee, have them help you come up with the 50 little things that they could do to get that change to happen, and then work on them one at a time. That makes sense. That's doable. That's real change. Asking them to go from A to Z doesn't work. And yet, we don't have time. We have leaders. We get busy. The organization wants to do stuff, and we forget, and we go back to people and are asking them to change too much, too fast, and it doesn't have lasting results. And again, the most important thing is it ends up impacting us negatively somewhere else in the organization. So let's talk for a moment about some of those new people coming in. Millennials will be 75% of the workforce. We have Gen Z coming in already. And so we really need to think about how they want to work, because the old way of working is going, every time someone is retiring, that more and more of that old way to work is going out the door. And really this future of work graph here is really what we're doing here in 2020. So much of what has been forced upon us with COVID-19 has forced us into the more future of work scenario that we're going to end up to anyways, but really helped us fast forward this. So working anytime versus 9 to 5, working anywhere, right? Using their own device, creating. So all of these different things here, we ask people to become leaders versus having to wait their turn, right? So we put people in charge of projects and teams, and really how do we help them be more adaptive leaders versus and learners, right? And learning something new as opposed to just focusing on overall knowledge. So These are areas that we can focus on. And this is what our employees want, right? They want someone who will share information. They want a boss who will share information and not hoard it. Okay? They want customized work for them. They want to figure out how they can be the most effective for the organization with their skill set. Okay? Not just be given here's a box of stuff, go do this. Okay? And that's not always easy as leaders, as an organization. It's hard to do sometimes. That's okay. But this is where we are going. This is what employees want. Another thing what employees want is for us to stop having location bias. Okay? And we are already seeing a mass exodus out of big cities right now. LA has seen this. New York has seen this. A lot of places, people are leaving because they're not being forced to stay in the city in order to have this job that they want. The job that they want is now okay with them being remote. They can now go move to another state, another city, another place, and get a bigger home or a cheaper home or a different lifestyle and not have to be stuck in that city right where their employer was. And so we can get people, if we allow remote work and hybrid work, and I'm going to talk more about that in a moment, we can get people who are just as qualified, who may cost us less as an organization, but are in a different location. So don't have this bias that you can only get a great head of marketing in LA, or you can only get a great customer experience person in New York, or you can, the list goes on and on. We can find great people anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world for that matter, based on where you're at. You may be able to utilize, remote people around the world if your company can be set up and utilize that. So remove location bias. Allowing more remote work or even hybrid remote work certainly is going to be the future. I have already talked to 3 CEOs this week who are baffled and do not understand why people don't want to come back to the office. They thought everyone wanted to be there. They thought their ping pongs and tables and beer Fridays made up for all of the other crap that people had to put up with to work in their office. And guess what? It didn't. People are happier working remotely or in some hybrid, coming in sometimes, working at home sometimes, having that flexibility. So employees want that flexibility. 76% of millennials would take less money to work from home. Okay? Remote employees actually get more done. We're seeing so much research about how much more effective, how much they're getting done. And this is on top of their kids being at home and their spouse being at home. Wait until that's not an issue. Okay? You're able to meet your talent goals on a small budget. Remote employees consistently show that they're more engaged if you have a good culture. If you got a terrible culture, remote ain't going to help you. It costs less. You don't need as many things. You don't have as much infrastructure to worry about. You can get access to new employee types, people that need to stay home, people who might be physically disabled but are perfectly able to do the job. They just aren't able to get there if they're maybe in a wheelchair or something like that. People who are retired or part-time mavens. There's so many different types of people you can go after if you're willing to allow remote work. And remote employees are 50% less likely to leave. There's a really great Stanford study about that. And of course, you can extend your hours of operation. If you are a West Coast company, you can have people on the East Coast answering the phones early. It's a really, really cool way to expand your client base and allow your clients to have more hours to talk to people. And of course, this will give you clearer communication and measurement because you have to have that in order to be remote. Now, I have this gentleman came in and studied my organization. His name is Dr. Aaron Lee. He did his dissertation and research at Walden University. He studied People G2, my company, and remote work, and he came up with some really cool findings. So traditionally, what we studied was that people want a personal connection. What was believed, sort of the old style of work is that people want a personal connection. That's the foundation of their work. Personal satisfaction. They want a family work environment, professional satisfaction, social interaction, and some work-life balance. This seemed pretty normal. This seemed pretty on point. But after studying successful remote companies, successful organizations with great cultures, what he found out was it was completely the opposite. Work-life balance was the most important thing. That means the ability to manage, ability to have authority over your time, right? So if I need to work from 9 to 11 today, but I really got to take 12 to 2 off because I have to be over to do something for my kids, I can do that and then come back and make up for it. I'm still going to get my full time of work in, but I can kind of manage that, manipulate that a little bit. I have the authority and the autonomy to do the job that I was given without someone micromanaging me. Social interaction is good, meaning we want to have social conversations, okay? That's really important. We have to find ways to get that. And then we want professional satisfaction, and that's more important than a familiar work environment, personal satisfaction, or even a personal connection. People don't want a best friend at work. They don't need to hang out with their boss and be BFFs with them. And yet we mistakenly thought that this personal connection, it's still important, don't get me wrong, but it's not the most important thing. Work-life balance is. That's what matters most. Social interaction, having the ability to work with my team and to talk with them and to have that back and forth, those two things are the biggest things right now. Inc. was really nice to do a study on us, and we have done over 100,000 virtual meetings since 2009. And we do a lot of 15-minute or less meetings throughout the day. In fact, we do like 40 a day between our teams. So if you're interested in reading the article about how we do that, about how we meet, I've done this in a lot of our other webinars. I'm not going to go into the meeting types today, but it is a big, big part of how we create that social interaction and allow for that work-life balance. The next thing that employees really want, and we're going to get to what they won't tell you in just a moment, but what they really want is for you to say yes. I can't tell you how many times younger Chris in my early career, I was unhappy in jobs, and I realized later on in life that it was because my boss always said no. The answer was always no. Like, we don't do it that way. It can't be done. And I came in with fresh ideas and new things I wanted to do, or at least I understood why we did it a certain way. What they want is for you to say yes. Now, you might think, geez, Chris, I can't say yes to everything. I can't say yes. There's no way. But I promise you can. And we steal this from improv comedy. We can say yes and yes but. So in any question someone asks you today, find a way to say yes. Yes, and we need to make sure this was, or yes, but. So someone comes to you and says, hey, I want to raise. Yes, but you need to make sure these things happen first. Okay, yes, and there are certain things that must be accomplished, or you must meet a certain, amount of your goals in order to qualify for that. You can find a way to say yes. And that is key for employees. They want a positive interaction. You may not actually be able to do the thing they want you to do, but you can start the conversation by saying yes and being willing and open to have that conversation about what that looks like and what that might be before maybe you might ultimately figure out there's a better solution or there's some block there that we can't do it right now. But if we just say no right away, it stops the conversation, it stops the innovation, it stops this idea of us talking through this and really puts the employee consistently in an unengaged state, which we don't want. If they feel like you're going to be open to their suggestions and open to their ideas and that you say yes on a regular basis or you try to help them find a way to say yes, that really opens people up to a much different interaction with you. Remember what makes us tick. This is Daniel Pink's work. People want the autonomy to do their job, to do it themselves. Yes, they need training. Yes, they need support. Yes, they might reach out, but when they know how to do their jobs, they don't need someone micromanaging and standing over them and telling them every little thing to do. Employees want mastery. They want to be learning new things. They want to be given new challenges. They want that specific tactical knowledge, right? They want to be learning. This is why we go to conferences. This is why you guys are here today on webinars, is hopefully maybe learn something new. Employees want that, and they need that. And then they need to be tied to our company's purpose. So do they even know what our purpose is? Does your company know what their purpose is? And are you talking about that and bringing it up and ensuring that they feel a connection to that purpose? If they don't, they probably should go work somewhere else. If your organization doesn't know what their purpose is, you need to figure that out quick. And if you're not doing a good job of talking about it, make sure that you bring it up. Bring it up in those monthly meetings that you're going to have now. Have your CEO bring it up in your conversations in your all staffs. Make sure that people know and are connected to their purpose. So what will employees not tell you? What are these hidden things that we see coming up on surveys? When I talk to employees in organizations that are really struggling and we have these confidential conversations, what are the things that they are consistently bringing up that they don't want to share to their leaders, they don't want to bring up to companies, and will just leave if they don't get them solved? Those are some very specific things. First is they want people to be brave. They want their leaders to be brave. Okay? Yes, bad people leave for bad bosses, but if your boss isn't willing to be brave and to stand up for you and to stand up for the organization or stand up for your team, stand up for your client, the leader isn't willing to be brave, you're going to lose good people. They want you to be inspiring. They won't tell you that. But if you're not inspiring, if you're a leader who doesn't learn new things, who doesn't share, insights, who isn't willing to admit mistakes, if you're not an inspiring leader, they're going to leave. They're not going to do their best work. But no one's ever going to come to you, knock on the door. Oh, hey, Chris, can I talk to you? You're not very inspiring. No, they're just going to leave and go somewhere else. But we see this over and over again that they want leaders who are brave. They want leaders who are inspiring. They need this from us so they can connect to their work in a more impactful and passionate way. They want us to be upfront. They want us to beat around the bush. They want us to be candid and upfront. Yes, you need to put on your hat of diplomacy, and we need to not come at them in a bad way, but they want us to be upfront. This is what I really need from you. You know what? I see you working really hard over here, but that's not the things I really value from you. I need you to work on A, B, and C first. This is what makes the most sense for us. This is the most important thing, and then do everything else. Be upfront. They need us to be compassionate. Sometimes we're having a hard time. Someone passed away in our lives. Maybe our kids are driving us crazy. Maybe we're in the middle of a divorce. Maybe who knows what's going on in our life. And as leaders, sometimes we want to keep people at a hand's distance because we're overwhelmed ourselves. But our people need us to be compassionate. How can you be more compassionate to your people? There's an exercise that I've talked about in past webinars called bonding. You can go on our webinars page on peopleg2.com or on chrisdyer.com. Or if you send me a note, I'm happy to send it to you. But you can ask your people how they're doing when they show up to a meeting, and ask them how they're doing when they leave a meeting. It's a really easy way to be compassionate. Be open. That means being transparent. That means sharing. That means telling people things that they haven't asked for yet so they can help make better decisions. We want to be okay. They want us to be okay with dissent. Employees will leave if they feel like their leader is not willing to hear a dissenting opinion. If they only surround themselves with people who will tell them what they want to hear or agree with their way of doing things, they want a team full of dissension, which is a little bit less comfortable. It's not as fun, but we want dissent because ultimately we want to do the right thing. We want to do the best thing. We want to have the best product, the best service, the best outcome for our clients so that we all can be successful. And we can't do that if we don't allow dissent. We need to allow dissent, disagreement, differences of opinions, diversity of thought. If you aren't allowing that, if you're not intentionally going and finding people who dissent, if you're always filling your teams up full of people who think just like you and always agree with you, you're going to lose top people because dissent is key for better results. They want you to be the boss, not their friend. You may end up being their friend. That may end up being a side effect. That's great. But be their boss first, because that comes with a sense of responsibility. There are certain things that you need to do, as a lot of them I just listed, that go along with being a boss. And that should be your first priority, not being their friend. They got plenty of friends. They got plenty of people that care about them. They need you to be their boss. They need you to step up and slay dragons and make awesome things happen if you want to keep your best people. Be clear. And how do you be clear? Well, sometimes you got to say things 3 times. Sometimes you got to repeat. Sometimes you got to ask them what they heard. Sometimes you got to send a text and an email and you got to tell them over Zoom. But you got to be clear. We got to say things over and over again. We got to make sure they heard us. We have to test those interactions to make sure they heard what we wanted them to hear. But be clear. Be rigid about the big stuff. Employees want you to be rigid about the big stuff. They want you to stand up and say, no, this is not right. We will not allow this to happen. This is not the kind of company that allows this or this or that. Okay? Be rigid about the big stuff. Be willing to stand up and say, if they don't want to change this, I'll leave or I'm going to get fired. I cannot allow this to happen. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to slay dragons for my team here. This is a big deal. This matters. Okay? This is the big stuff. But they want you to be flexible about the small stuff. We've all, with that book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. Okay? They want you to be really flexible on the small stuff. Ultimately, what I see is that leaders wimp out and cower about the big stuff and aren't there for you. And then on the small stuff, they make a big deal about it. And we need the complete opposite. So employees will not tell you this stuff. They're not willing to sit you down and say, hey, leader, you're not doing this for me. But this is what they want. This is what we consistently, thousands and thousands and thousands of people that I have surveyed have brought up these issues about their leaders, things they would never tell them that are a big issue for them. This is the stuff that comes up in exit interviews over and over and over again that they weren't willing to tell their boss, but they were willing to leave about. So again, we will send this presentation out. You'll be able to look at this later, so if you're not able to take all the notes that you need. Another area that they won't share with you is about how their onboarding process went. People come in, they get a new job, they're excited, they want to do great. It's a really awkward time to tell someone that their onboarding process wasn't so good, right? They may like the job or like their boss, but it's kind of a no-no to show up and say, knock, knock, HR, thanks for hiring me. I'm really happy. It's my second day. I'm going to tell you how bad your onboarding process was. That's not typically something that happens. And yet it ends up ruining other people from coming into your organization, or maybe ruining them from giving you a good referral because they don't really want to put somebody else through that process. So they won't tell you that your current recruitment process sucked, that you didn't communicate with them very well, that people were late to interviews or canceled, or that was really hard to do. They won't tell you how bad your onboarding process was, how many dumb forms they had to sign in triplicate and things that just didn't make sense. So you need to maybe go back and think about that. How can you make this process better? That they felt pressure to agree, to fit in right away, that they weren't asked to dissent. They were not valued for dissenting. They were valued for fitting in and agreeing in order to get along and build rapport early on. How can we change that? How can we make that better for people coming in? How can we help them feel like they can dissent? We want to hear their opinion. We value their fresh perspective. That's why we hired them, right? We didn't hire them to come in and tell me what Sally and John already told me, or else I wouldn't need them, right? We want them to dissent. We want them to feel open to do that. They won't tell you that they lacked a designated person to help them. They maybe had a whole bunch of people who said, let me know if you need anything, but that's not a designated person to help. They need someone, they need a buddy, maybe on several teams, maybe overall for the company. They need people designated who are there, who are checking in, who are being pesky about saying, I haven't heard from you. You were 3 days in. Are you okay? Are you getting everything? Where can I help you? They need that. And they won't tell you that they don't like their boss. They'll just leave. Maybe they thought their boss was one thing and they got here and went, whoa, this is not what I thought it was. They're not going to tell you. They're just going to leave. So if that's something that's happening, that's a real issue in your organization, you may need to find out how can you test that? How can you deal with that issue right away and maybe keep that great person? All right. We're going to pause here for a moment to see if you all have any questions. Then I'm going to give you some additional tactical things that I think you can do to really help your organization to be better with this. But if you have a question, now is a good time. There's lots of comments. I'm not going to read through the comments, but thank you all so much for all the nice comments and people agreeing with some of the things that I mentioned. I'm not going to read through those. One question, managers need to be equipped to be coaches and hold space. For quality conversations, yes, absolutely. I guess that wasn't a question. Lots of great comments. So if you have a question, pop it in now. If you don't, I will at the very end ask for questions again. But don't. A couple more came in, but these are just great comments. Thank you so much, everybody. Let's see. Do you have a template for employee review appraisals? So it's a great question. I don't have a template. What we talk about with our leaders is what is it we want out of those conversations, and we come up with big bullet points, big values, big things that we care about that they talk through with their employees. So we kind of create a template because that's customized to us. We care about team collaboration. We care about how people are helping clients and employees, their fellow employees first, right? So those are big things that make a difference in our organization, and so we talk about those things first. So it's not like there's some template like you would see for an annual review, right? We're coming up with what are the big things we want to talk about every month, what are the couple things we need to talk about every 2 or 3 months, and then we kind of create that on the fly and that's maybe different. Sales looks different than customer service looks, than research looks, than marketing looks. Those are all I work with those leaders. Those leaders report to me. I work with them on what they should be thinking about, come up with that, and then they go back and customize that with their employees. So unfortunately, it's highly customized. Fortunately, it's highly customized. So it works really well. Thank you for that question, Jennifer. All right. So you can continue sending questions if you have them. Looks like, and I will go ahead and tell you some of the things you should be thinking about doing right away that will really help you. Is this now a separate line of services? Yeah, I do consulting. So you can contact People G2. You can contact me directly. Yes, I do consulting around this. So and have for a few years now. So what should you do? Now that we know what employees want, now we know what they won't tell us, what should you do to deal with some of these things? Here are my little takeaways. Stop having one-on-one meetings. Now, I just told you to have review meetings, and you should have those, and those are good, but outside of your review meetings or some meeting about something that's really an issue, make sure you're having more collaborative team meetings. You will get more done, you'll be able to have better conversations, and people have higher transparency and understand more if you're meeting with people in groups of 3, 4, 5, 6, or maximum 7 at a time to collaborate and get information and dissent and all of that. My team has a 15-minute, we call them a cockroach meeting with 5 to 7 people, 30 to 40 times a day. They get so much more done than having one-on-one meetings with people where they're talking and then having to stop, talk to somebody else, stop, talk to somebody else, and then when the heck do you get your work done? Instead, you get 5 people on, quick talk, and it's a real shift. It's a real mind shift to be effective and communicate quickly and then get off the phone, okay? We want to stop having long meetings on video. If you're having a bunch of people and you're spending an hour or more on video, you're killing your team. You're wasting all of their focus and their hard work. Cut it down. It's too much. Okay, people need to go to the bathroom. They need time to go get more coffee. If you're doing an hour on Zoom, if that has to happen, you should be taking a break at 30 or 40 minutes in for 5 minutes. Turn off videos. Let people go and go to get coffee and go to the bathroom and do whatever they need to do. Maybe go move the laundry over. You can't just have people stuck in these long meetings. It's killing people. You need to curate your meetings better. I talked about my 15-minute meeting, cockroach meetings. We do ostrich meetings. We have different types of meetings so that we know what we want. But inside that curation, we want to make sure we always start meetings on time. This is the number one thing you can do to make your meetings better. Nobody wants to go to a meeting and then have it start late. People don't show up on time in my company. They got to sing a song. Unless they're a really good singer and they can recite terrible poetry for us. We always want to try to end early. That comes from Parkinson's law that says if you set a certain amount of time to do it, it takes you that amount of time to do it. So if your goal is always to end a meeting early, you can end and save time for everybody. No agenda, no meeting. You should not be meeting without an agenda. Even if it's a one-item agenda, that's fine. But if you should not show up to just a general meeting for, let's say, customer service team, and there not be an agenda of things that are going to be talked about. Because you should be able to prepare. You should be able to be ready to talk about those things. That's how we get things done faster. Okay? And if there's no agenda, you shouldn't have to go to the meeting. No agenda, no meeting. That's a rule in our company. What else should you be doing? Well, I'm going to ask you all to ditch the annual company survey and instead work to a weekly survey. Imagine if you sent out one question to your employees each week. Now, we don't get 52 of these done. We probably get 47 or 48 of these in. A weekly survey, one question only. Now, if your company's gigantic, you might break this down and only survey your team or a department. If your organization is less than 100 employees, then you can survey everybody. And typically what I see is it's good maybe for 2 or 3 months to tell everyone, hey, everything you answer, first of all, it should always be confidential, but you might tell them your answers will only be seen by me, the CEO, or only seen by me, the HR person, or whatever it may be. That way people can tell you things they need to tell you without being worried that you're going to share it with somebody else who might figure out who they are. Then for another 3 or 4 months, you might do the same survey, but tell them, hey, now every answer is going to be shared with the entire company. We're going to ask you things about what we can do better and who's doing a great job for us and where we're really exceeding. And we want to share that information with everyone. We want to be transparent. So if you could get 48 questions answered by most people every week, right, over the period of a year, you can quickly read those answers, figure out what the problems are, make changes, communicate to people the things they need to know, instead of waiting a whole year, asking all of your employees these questions, taking months and months and months to figure out how to implement change, develop the change, put it in place, and by then your employees are pissed off anyways because they're on to new things and they've either left or the problem isn't even an issue anymore. We want to judge them on their impact. So figure out how to measure what matters. Measurement's one of my other pillars. We want to measure what matters. Judge them on their impact. So that means you got to come up with key performance indicators. You got to come up with goals that are customized and adjust them as time goes on. So we are measuring people on what matters and that we are measuring them on their impact. Remember to celebrate wins and just to say thank you. It's huge. Somebody does something great, a good thing happens, don't forget to stop and celebrate. Call a giant Zoom meeting. Everyone gets their favorite beverage. I don't know. Send everybody donuts. Do something. A big win happens. Don't forget to celebrate. We got enough crap going on in our lives right now. If we don't celebrate the good stuff, it's difficult to want to continue to do your best work. And just remember to say thank you and encourage your team to say thank you to anyone who did something great, who did something for somebody else. Even if they didn't do it for you, you saw they did it for somebody else, say thank you. Find a way to publicly acknowledge them. Talk about how work will be different going forward. This is a really good conversation to have with your teams and those groups. How can work be different going forward? What would that look like? What will we do if work is different? What if we can't all come back to the office and we're not going to be, some of us are going to remote forever, some of us are going to remote sometimes. Maybe the office is only going to allow half the people in there at any one time. How will work be different this year and next year? You had better start talking about that and getting their input, their buy-in, their ideas, their suggestions, and their design. Because they're the ones that have to work in it. So really think about that. All right. I promised you, if you had any other questions or some other great comments, I just thank you so much for all the wonderful feed forward. Again, think about what your employees want. Think about what they're not telling you. Hopefully some of this insight helps you. If anyone has any other questions, happy to answer them. You're more than welcome to reach out to me. There's my email address, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Again, if you signed up for this webinar, a copy of this PDF of the slides will be sent. A link to this full video webinar will be sent out as well, and happy to have you share it with your team. If you need more help with your background checks, your drug testing, People G2 is happy to help you. And if you need help with your culture, your remote work, leadership, I have a new course that's come out this month that you can share it with you, or I also do consulting as well for organizations. So thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful, wonderful September. hopefully October is better, and let's get through the rest of 2020 and make 2021 the best it can be. Thank you, everyone.